What I'm going to do is I'm just going to introduce how we get into the materials, what you're going to be looking forward to, the things that you're going to need to research, the paints, the brushes, and what's out there that you can buy. One of the things I do want to point out is that you have to be careful, especially when it comes to scale, because in figures, scale doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. There's some figures that are made in 1/32nd scale and some figures that are 35th scale, but they'll tell you it's 1/35th scale, but it's not. So you have to be careful about the scales of what you buy, and also that whoever the manufacturer is, they are also, sometimes some are good and some of them are not that great. So you have to inspect what you buy or know what you're going to buy. Okay, so those are certain things that you all have to look at when you go into the stores. Example, one of the things that everybody's used to seeing is they go into the store and you see the regular plastic model kits like this, right? And inside you get, a nice little screw like this, and here's your figures. Okay, now that's generally given, that's what you can find in most of the stores. Once you go beyond this, you're going to run into little box kits like these. And inside these little box kits are custom-made figures made of resin. And some of you do know what resin is, some of you don't know resin. It's like a poured cast plastic figure. And they're very well done. But in this particular area is where I ask everybody to be careful about size. Because some of them don't register as 35th scale. Some of them are actually bigger. And having said that as well, I remember Trident, which is a plastic model company like these here. Their figure kits are a little smaller than 35th scale. So you have to be careful again. All right, but you'll find injection molded versus cast. Cast is better. You're going to find sharper detail, better quality. But not just resin are you going to find. You're going to find other companies like a more expensive kind, like this one here is called Pegaso. And Pegaso makes their figures out of white metal. And their castings are exceptional and they're very beautiful, but they come at a cost. Okay? So as you go along, you're going to find different various kinds of figures out there in various materials. It's all based on your preference as you go along and what you think and what you like about them. Now, lastly, there is one other type of figure, and it's a vinyl cast figure. And they're soft, like that, and some of them are very large. You don't see these too often. You'll find them mostly for the comic books, the fantasies, the movies, movie topics, and things like that. But they're very well done as well. I haven't seen any of these lately. I'd love to see some more of these. So, having said that, those are the kinds of figures you're going to run into. Yes?
Is there an issue with lead?
There can be, but nowadays there is things that are made of white metal, which is a different kind of material. It's like lead. And I'm thinking that a lot of them are made in white metal versus lead for that health reason. All right, so having said that, one of the great ingredients everybody's going to need to get once you start learning how to paint figures is obviously you got to have a painting book, right? You have to have something to follow. You have to have a Bible to paint from, right?
Did you write that book?
No, I wish I did. Excellent materials are out there. Go out there, research, go find your Bibles, okay? They're great reference materials to go with. Now, other than that, you're going to get into two areas. One, you're going to get into either an acrylic world, where everything is water-based paint, or you're going to get into artistic paints, as in oil paint. They're two different styles. They're two different ways. I'll try and run through both of them for you as quick as I can, because I don't want to lose you guys. You're in the dark. I know it's going to happen. You're going to fall asleep. Anyways, having said that, you're going to need your first primary tool, your paintbrushes. Okay, what kind of brushes are you going to run into? You're going to run into all kinds of silly brushes, like here. This is a nylon bristle brush. Dip that into lacquer thinner, you know what's going to happen. They're all just going to scrunch like this, and they're not going to be any good to you. All right? So I wouldn't suggest any nylon bristle brushes. You get these brushes from art stores. You can find them in your hobby shops as well. And generally, most craft stores, if you find them, they'll have a line of brushes as well. But nylon is out of the question. You're going to run into bristles like this, white hairs, like a hog hairs, like a squirrel. But when you brush with this stuff and you make it wet, you're going to find that sometimes they don't have a good spring to them when you brush, and they don't really give you a decent coverage, and they're very streaky when they paint. So I wouldn't suggest that. You can see how it doesn't hold its edge, right? You can see how it bends. You're going to run into other kinds of brushes. Squirrel's pretty lame. I wouldn't use it either. It doesn't hold its point either. Okay. You have other brushes. Another one that you're all going to run into sooner or later is the synthetic. The synthetics are nice, but keep in mind these synthetics are very much like the nylon bristle, which means that if you put it into any kind of solvent, they're going to start to dissolve. Now, if you, I don't know if you can see this. No, you can't see it. If you look at this one is a synthetic, and what has happened over time is the hairs have learned to peel away from the rest of the hairs, and that it will be detrimental when you start painting. So I would suggest not to use the synthetic hairbrush either. So you're asking, okay, what is the right brush? When you go out, you're going to find two kinds of hairs that I'd suggest to find, and one of them, you can't see there, it's called Kolinsky hair. It's a red sable brush. Okay, these are one of the better quality brushes. It's a natural hair. It can handle most of the solvents, and it paints well, and it holds its edge and its point very, very well. Now, some people will paint 000, 00, quadruple zero, whatever. Do you really need it? I would say I don't think so in my view, being that if you start with a 1 or a 2, because it has so much more hairs, it tends to keep its point longer. And it's the point that you want. It's not how fine that hair or that brush is. It's the point that you're after. So the more hairs you have to keep that point, you have a sharper point every time you brush. So it's all preferences. You have to learn. I have, for my fine detail work, I start with a 0 and a 1. I like 0s and 1s. They're really great for fine details. In your painting of acrylics, 0s and 1s are generally what you want for doing the fine work of acrylic painting. Once you get into oil paints, you can start with the 0s, but you're going to broaden yourself into a 1/4 inch flat like that. And you'll see what I'm going to say in a little while as I show you along the way. But all these brushes that I have here are Kolinsky sables, or they're blends, which have some nylon bristles in them, which isn't good. Okay, so try and keep the best as pure hair brushes like Kolinsky. You don't have to buy Winsor Newton, by the way, because Winsor Newton is very, very expensive. I have some here from companies called Nobel. I've got some here from Vallejo, Raphael, name brands, and I've got another brand here that I like to go by, which is called Escoda, which is made in Spain. So go out, look around for the stores. You'll find your good brushes. Go with those. Another thing that you need to have to take care of your brushes is this brush. It's called I have here. It's called the Masters Brush Cleaner. This is a soap that you can use to wash your brushes with. After you've cleaned your brushes out, you swish them in the water. You open this up and you just brush it in there. Let the soap sit in your brush. What happens is it keeps the hairs together. It doesn't flay them open once they're dry. Okay? If the hairs stay together, they're going to stay together when you're painting as well. Yes?
The brush cleaner and preserver is good for acrylic, oil, or hardened acrylic, oil, and
This
soap, but it doesn't have like a noxious vapor. It's soap.
No, this is just like a block of soap. This is just like a block of soap. I know what you're talking about there. This is just for the final part of cleaning your brushes, okay? When you're ready to use them and get ready to paint, swish them in the water, take the soap out, and they're ready to go. Brush the water out, and off you go into the paint, okay? As to what you were saying earlier, what happens is when you guys are using your paintbrushes, nobody really thinks about this after a while, but what happens is that when we use our paintbrushes, over time, I don't know if you can see this, at the very end there, you can see there's a little discoloration. That's paint left over, okay? And it's right at the tip of the ferrule. So what happens when there's dry paint left over is that it works into the hairs of the brushes and it starts to spread them open like that because now there's paint in there and it's drying that way, so that it doesn't hold its point anymore, okay? So that's what happens when you don't clean your brushes properly. So what I'm asking you guys to do is when you're done with your paintbrushes, clean them properly. One of the best things I love to use to clean these brushes with is an ingredient here. It's called Winsor Newton Brush Cleaner and Restorer. This stuff is very good. It's health friendly, it says. But what I want you guys to remember is this. Whatever you brush or clean with, don't put it next to your models because this stuff eats into plastic. It will melt it. So be careful, don't use it anywhere near your models. But having said that as well, this stuff is very aggressive. It cleans really well. It takes out all kinds of paint from your brushes, even when you think that they're clean. Also, what's really great about this ingredient is if you're using your airbrush, it cleans it out amazing. You can leave it sitting in there as well. So this is a really great product. I love this stuff a lot. I wouldn't suggest using the airbrush product of this version because this one works better. This is called Winsor Newton Brush Cleaner.
Kind of substance, like lack of bitter.
No, it's got some natural ingredients in it. It's a non-toxic, biodegradable thing about it, but it is aggressive on plastic, so I'm not exactly 100% sure it's safe, but I haven't had any reactions yet. But it's a great cleaner.
It'll forgive a lot of sins, like if you leave your brushes unclean for say 2 years.
Yeah.
But be very careful when you're taking your brushes out of the cleaner, because if it drips onto the handle of another brush, you have a gooey mess.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
While we're on the topic of chemicals, Chris brought this to my attention. Chris, do you want to talk about it? It's called Beauty Secrets Superior Nail Products Liquid. And what's that for?
This is actually something you can use in place of liquid cement. Works very, very well in plastic. This bottle is about $5. You get it at a beauty supply store. This is a good brand. I've heard about this one through a site on the internet. I haven't tried the other brands, but this smells just like the stuff that the liquid cement is comprised of. So
At what,
it
10,
works very well.
1/10 the cost.
1/10 the cost. This is a $5 bottle.
What we don't realize is
try.
the beauty salon will see guys coming in there buying these.
You got to be careful with that too.
Sorry, Yink, go ahead.
That's okay. All right. If we decide to go with painting and oils, okay, one of the other ingredients that you need to use is oil painting medium 1. You blend this with your oils, it actually helps the paint flow a lot better whatever the surface is that you're painting on. It's a great ingredient. It really does change the effect of how oil paint goes down on a figure, or whatever you choose to use this with.
What is that called?
Grumbacher's Oil Painting Medium 1. I don't know if you can see that there. Put it in the light.
there you go.
There you go. Everybody can see that there?
Where do you get the soap from?
This one, I got this from an art store. You can find these in art stores anywhere.
What's it called?
It's called the Master's Brush Cleaner. It's a great little soap. It helps keep the hairs together. The other thing that is also great with cleaning your brushes with oils or enamel colors and whatever is Artist White Spirits. It's a great solvent. It's very forgiving. It's a great cleaner. It's also good for helping you put washes down from enamel colors as well.
So none of those cleaners will destroy the synthetic brush.
No, they're gentle. They're gentle. They're gentle enough. They're not going to be that aggressive. Okay. Having said that, if you decide to go with acrylic paints, one of the popular brands There's this brand here, it's, from Vallejo. They're in the nice little bottles like this, little squeeze bottles and such. The only thing I don't like about these is once you brush anything onto a figure, you'll find that it'll come off in your hands. So once you brush it, protect it, put it away, don't touch it. Okay, so this paint doesn't handle well to being handled by hand.
Does a primer help?
It does, but it still wears. There's another brand, Andrea, the hobby company, another figure model company makes paint as well, but I don't have them here. But most of the colors that you'll find from those who paint in acrylics for figures, they'll be painting from bottles like these. When they paint from bottles like that, they use something called a wet palette. This is a regular wet palette from our art store. When you open it up, you're going to find a sponge inside. And what you do with the sponge is you use something called a wet palette paper, like here, and you soak both the items and you put it inside. And what happens is when you drop your acrylic paint in there, it'll keep it for a longer period of time. You can keep it for a week if you want. This particular thing I found a little bit big, so what I do is I made a smaller version using a simple little dish like this. Glass dish, a snap together lid, right? You cut a little sponge off, put a little paper in there, and that's generally about as much paint as I'm going to use. And this is more than 2 weeks old, and it's still decent. So that's what the luxury of having a wet palette does, is it keeps your paint wet, and you can continue painting for a long period of time.
Is that glass or plastic?
This one is glass. It doesn't really matter as long as it seals and the moisture stays in. The only thing is that over time, you have to wash them out because they do grow mold. So you don't want to keep them forever. Every once in a while, take them out, wash them, and let them air. I've taken the same idea for doing oil, so it works both ways.
Well, when you say water, is that just regular tap water or
Yep.
distilled?
No, regular tap water.
Regular tap water.
So what I'm saying is, you guys don't need to go buy something this big. You can take the same ingredients and put it into something that small. The sponges, you can easily get these from the grocery store, right? Just go look in the cleaning section, you can find these sponges anywhere. The paper for the wet palette, you can get that from the art stores, they have it. This particular paper I find holds really well. It doesn't pill when you paint on it. Like if you're all thinking of using regular paper, it pills when it's wet. So I wouldn't suggest using regular paper. So this is the kind of paper that can handle it. So if this is the only investment you buy, this is the only investment you'll get from the art store. Okay, so having said that part of it, then we get into oil paints. Oil paints, you're going to find the student quality and you're going to get the artist quality. You can buy them from various companies, but what you're going to find with the student quality is there's more oil in it and it doesn't help you paint as much. You'll find that the artist qualities have less oil, which gives you like a paste and it's easier to paint with. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how that works. All right? So, all right, those things out of the way. Now once you get into painting figures, if you look at each other in here, there's a light coming in one direction, right? And it's exactly how you people should all look at how you paint a figure, from a direction of a light and where it falls on the figure. It's very important how it works. I can't illustrate it exactly until I have this beautiful picture here. This beautiful picture illustrates exactly what I'm talking about. Okay? So if you look in here, in this picture, you notice the light is coming directly above, and you can see everything in the background is turned into a beautiful shadow. I'm talking about on the figure, not behind the figure. So if you look at his head, it's nicely lit. Okay? And you look at the rest of it, like this chest here, and the upper part of his uniform, it's nicely lit. But as you go down further down here, it starts to fade. Behind his head, it starts to fade. So you can see how the effect of painting in the direction of light is effective. That's just one figure. Got this from Chicago last year. He was a beautiful painter, and I love looking at his work. Now, one figure is one thing, right? But how it really works is when you add a multiple group of figures, then you really see how it turns out. So, having said that, same thing, same painter. This is a multiple group of figures painted in one direction of light. And you can see how effective it looks when certain areas of their heads are spotlighted and they're put together like that. It is a beautiful composition, well painted. And when you look at this in real, like this photograph, it looks like a painting. But these are actual figures. So, I don't know if you can see how well that's done. It is just really amazing work. Absolutely beautiful work. I'll pass this around. You can guys get an idea how the idea about this is. But direction of light is very important when you paint your figures. Okay? Don't mix and match, change the direction of light in all the figures, then the whole thing looks weird, right? You all have to paint in the same direction and then group the figures together. So you see how that works really well. Okay, so I can pass
So
that.
on that one, this guy here in the gray, would his back all be darker gray?
Yes, yes. The backside you don't have to add more highlights and whatever. The center of focus is in the front, so that's where you paint your center of focus. Okay. The other thing is that when you paint figures, what's the first thing everybody wants to look at? Everyone wants to look at the head. Okay, they're going to be looking at the eyes and the head. Okay. So having said that, that's the star feature of every one of your figures. It's all the head. That's the first thing that anybody's going to look at once you put a figure into anything. They're all going to look at the head. They're going to look at the eyes. They're going to look at the mouth, lips, and everything else, right? So if you're going to work on anything really well, it's doing the head, okay? All right, so I can pass that about, let you guys look at it.
And when you're doing a group of figures, you have to look at not just the shadows on the individual figures, but the shadows that other figures cast on that figure.
I would say don't do that, because if you did that, you just make your work harder for yourself. Do each one as it is, but treat each one from the same direction of light. Because
But
if
they
it
cast
does,
shadows on each other.
if it does cast a shadow, you don't have to paint the shadow, but the figure alone will stand as it is really well. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's just paint it beautiful that way. You treat each one individually, but treat it in the same direction of light. Okay, so having said all of that, all right, I'm going to get into a little bit of this. Once in a while, some of you guys are airplane guys, right? You guys are going to get into little guys like this, right? You want to put next to your little airplanes and things like that.
Yeah, little airplane guy.
So what I'm going to
You said that
say.
just like my ex-wife would say.
You're so little.
It's amazing.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a really quick session here with a little head. I don't know if you're going to, no, you're not going to see that. It's really, really, really
look
tiny.
At this, look at this. Look at this.
Oh, wrong side of focus. I got to move my hand. All right, let me see if
You see individual
right there.
pixels, you're closer.
All right, so what I've done is I've painted just the head. It's just a flat base color of flesh tone, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to do this really kind of nice. They're rudimentary, but works decently enough because it's so tiny.
Chris, can I borrow some of your nail polish remover? He's got some.
So, anyways, keeping in mind the direction of light in your figure and everything, right now he's painted in the brightest color possible, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of a darker highlight, or darker highlight, but I'm going to add some shadows to him and to his flesh tone. So what I'm going to do is here I'm going to mix a little bit of a darker flesh tone with the regular flesh, and treating my direction of light coming from this way, for example.
Here we go.
Treating my direction of light coming from this way, I'm going to paint the shadows on the opposite side. So, as I do this, I'm going to paint the whole side of his head in one darker shadow. Yeah, get some more water. And I'm going to try and get into his eye socket, and the side of his nose, and the side of his face, and under his neck, under his chin. Bit on his forehead like so, like that. Now you can take some of that shadow and put it on the opposite side into the same eye socket and along the hairline and around the ears, and follow it under his jawbone like so. And under the nose as well, so another area where you're going to get shadow. As it is at the moment, but what happens is we're going to come back and we're going to do some corrective work to it later on, and the whole thing will just fall together in a few minutes if you just follow me. Yeah. Okay, having done that, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to camouflage a lot of the work that I've just done here in this little figure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a wash now. What the wash does is a beautiful thing, is it helps blend everything I've done and hides imperfections and actually helps how everything else turns out.
What color is that wash?
The wash is a medium tone flesh.
Blending.
It's kind of hard to see, being it's so small, but let's check. Let's see what happens. Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Okay, from here, I'm almost done. What I'm going to do is just going to throw in a few highlights now. So highlights go from the top of the brow here, top of the nose, a little bit on the cheekbones, and maybe a little bit on the chin. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my original light flesh tone color that I used, and I'm just going to throw it just above the eyebrows, on the top of the nose, and just a little bit on the cheekbones. On one side I'm not going to do so much because I'm thinking about my direction of light. And on top of the chin. Yeah, he's not bad. He's not bad. So, I don't know if you guys can see him. A little bit, not bad for a little 72 scale figure. It's rudimentary, but it's good enough to fool anyone.
And that's what you would have done for one figure at the same time now, which is what, less than 20 minutes.
That's just for what I would do for a quickie for a little 72 scale figure. Now, I'm going to get into a little bit more of the heavier detail work. This figure, I painted for the Peel Scale model guys a little while ago, and I just did a quick job on painting the acrylic side of him here. So today I'm going to get into explaining how I'm going to do this, the other half, in oil paint, so you can see the differences of how the oil paints will look over an acrylic. Now, there's some people out there who can really pull off an acrylic really well. Paul's still here. He is an excellent figure painter. Blending acrylics isn't easy, especially when it's a big head. What happens is you can actually see the block color separations, and it's harder to camouflage. What I was doing with a smaller figure is, because I can put the wash in on such a small area, I can camouflage a lot of the highlights and a lot of the shadows, so it looks like one consistent color. But once you go to a figurine that's about this big, it's harder to hide. So that's one of the detriments about painting with acrylics, is that it's harder to hide when the head is bigger. So 35th scale and larger, 35th is probably about the safest area that you can paint with that can really fool people's eye with acrylic. But once you start getting bigger than 35th scale, it's harder to hide. Oil paint, on the other hand, is a different story. You can use it for everything, and it is very forgiving. It has a consistency of painting like butter. It's really great. The only thing that you people have to deal with is that the drying time is delicate, and it takes 5 days. You guys can cook them in a crock pot, you can stick them in the oven, but you have to keep your eyes on them because they tend to melt. What I would do is I would turn the oven light on and stick my hand in it. It feels like a nice hot humid day inside, and it's generally okay. What'll happen is when you're cooking them, the shiny coat of the oil starts to flatten, and that's the kind of effect that you want to see. But sometimes I won't even do that. I'll let it dry shiny, and I'll just come back with a spray, a flat finish spray, and it'll take the shine right out. So in that way, it's safer. I didn't lose my figure, and my paint is the way I want it to be. Okay, so having said that, when you people have to look at a face, you're going to see a set of eyes, okay? Eyes on figures are one of the hardest things to do for some people, because if you ever look at some figures, one eyeball looks bigger than the other, or one doesn't look round. the reason why we have that problem is that we're using the right side of our brain. Our right side of our brain is telling us how to paint it, but it's not seeing it the way we want to see it. So to paint right side up, you're going like this, right? With the eyes. And that's when your hand tends to wander. If you take the head and you flip it the other way around like that, and you paint upside down, you're going to actually paint a better eye. Okay? Now, once we get into small figures like the size of this guy, he is a 35th scale head, and some people make the attempts to paint them, and I find that sometimes it's nice, sometimes it isn't, and you really don't need to paint the eyeball, being that it's such a small figure. So I cheat, and I use these wonderful little things. These are micron markers, and if you can see the point, all you have to do is just dab 2 dots and there's your eyes. These are permanent markers. You can find them in the art stores. They come in different widths and stuff like that. You can see the differences there. And it's easy eyeballs. That's what I love about them. And you don't have to sit there and squint. And you have to use magnifying glasses and whatever. Just make sure that when you place them, that's exactly where you want to place them with your aim.
What color? Black?
Yeah, just use regular black.
For 35th.
For 35th scale, yeah, you can. There's another color that's out there which I've been thinking about. It's a brown color. It's called sepia, and you can also use that as well. They're not bad. Okay, having said that, I am going to get into showing you how you do an eye. One of the things that you need to do prior to painting in oil is just in the hairs, just gently in the hairs, and then it just helps you allow you to just gently blend. The other ingredient you need to use is the Barbakan M1. So, what we do is, you take a little M1, dab it in your brush, and in this particular time, I guess I'll take this person's eye and I'm just going to paint a dark brown pupil. Okay, so I don't know how many people can see this. I'm going to try upside down. All right, so paint it upside down. Sorry if my hands are shaking a bit. Now what I've done here on this face is I've painted it with a base of acrylic flesh tone, and that's what you need to start off doing any flesh tones with oils. You have to paint the base colors on with an acrylic first before you use an enamel. But you see me painting it upside down, you can see how nicely my hand went around and painted the eyeball, right? If you paint it this way, you're going to find it's going to be a little bit more difficult. More challenging even. All right, now one of the nice things about using oils is the effect of. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken a little bit of the highlight, which is a little bit of a white, and I've painted it underneath the eyeball like that. Okay, now in some big figures you have that luxury. These little ones. Like these little 35th scales, you don't have that luxury at all, okay? So, having said that, don't worry about the little guys. Now, I have in here, there's a little bit of paint cleaner. I just take that in, I swish it out, I blot my colors out, carry on. Now, the next thing is, if you guys look at your eyes, all right, you look underneath your eyes, you're gonna see that in the inside it's a little bit pink, it's a little bit, you know, everybody's eyes are a little bit pink on the inside of the eyelid, right? So what you guys have to do is you have to incorporate that as well. So what you do is you take a little bit of your reds and add it to your flesh tones, create that color pink by mixing on your palette here. And with most figures that sorry, most figures that you can do, you put it under the eyelid, like such. And you put a little bit into the tear duct as well, if you can reach it. But having said that is because this is a big figure. Little figures, you can't have that luxury at all. So what you do is you just paint basically an outline like I've done here. And then you get into the underside of the eye. Like such. So far, everybody's following me so far? Same color can also work with the mouth, so you can actually go into painting the mouth. Oops, sorry. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of a darker color because I'm going into his mouth to create a shadow now. Now the nice thing about painting with oils is I haven't shown you what the nice thing about it is, and that's called feathering. Feathering, I'm going to take this other brush here. This is a number 2 brush. It's a flat brush, and I'm going to show you this is how we feather the color. And what it does is it blends it in. It's like airbrush with paintbrush. So you can see there, I painted the mouth with a little bit of a shadow, a dark shadow in the mouth and everything, and it works pretty decently. Now that I've got most of the hard part done, I can get into doing the flesh tones so you can see how the flesh tones work out. I'm going to darken his pupil up a bit here. That's much better. All right. Having a big figure, you don't need a small brush to constantly do most of the work. I only wanted to do the eyes and the mouth quickly because they're small areas and they're the areas that most people are going to be looking at. So having done that, I'm going to get into the larger part now of the larger figure painting. I'm going to add in the flesh tone with a quarter brush that you'll see here, and this will be a faster job. Now don't worry about it getting messy. Just keep the paint where it needs to be. Nice thing about oil paints is you're allowed to get messy. Don't worry about getting it into his hair. Okay, now he's got a nice base coat. One of the things about painting with oils is that don't use the same brush, especially when you're doing feathering processes. You actually have to use several brushes at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feather this, or basically clean away some of this painting and just leave the highlights alone. So I'm coming back with a clean brush now, a clean dry brush, and you can actually see I'm actually removing bits of the paint away. as I'm doing this. So I'm leaving paint where it needs to be, and I'm there. Now, the interesting thing about painting in oils is once you put your bases down, the best thing to do about painting in oils is you have to start dark to light. In acrylic painting, it's light to dark. So I'm going to go right away and just dig right into the shadows. So I'm going to start with the eye. I'm going to go underneath the eye. And I'm going to start working with the shadows. So I'm working under the eyelid, near and around the tear duct areas, on the bottom half of his eye. So what I'm doing is, what you're seeing is I'm basically outlining this figure's shadows. I'm going to do behind his nostril, into his nostril, and along the hairline of his beard and his hair. He also has eyebrows as well, so I can add a little darkener into his eyebrows. And the color I'm using, if you're asking, is it's a very dark brown. It's a burnt umber. And you can actually put some of this into his beard as well if you wish. If you want him to be dark brown haired. Okay. Add a little bit of shadow along the bridge of his nose. Now, what you're seeing is very rudimentary, and you have to understand something, that as I keep doing this, it's a process where you have to build it up on layers. You can't just paint it in one shot, all right? Never have the expectation that you're going to do this in one shot, because the next day you're going to see there's a difference. So if you see my brush, I'm actually feathering away the shadow onto his skin.
Sorry, when you're doing that, is the brush moist with thinner of any kind, or?
I wouldn't do it with something that's like that, because it would make it it would turn it into a wash.
Yeah.
It's best to work it at a dry brush. If you actually had some in there, it would just start to turn it into a wash, and it'll start running. And when you're brush painting oils, as you're seeing what I'm doing right now, it works best when the brush is dry. So what I'm doing is I'm drawing the shadow out onto his cheeks.
And when you mentioned before, Ying, that but the light from 3/4 up or whatever on
Yeah.
that angle,
Yeah.
if this happened to be the area that is away from the light, would you be adding dark across the whole area of this face? Do you know what I mean? Or how do you get that dark
Yeah.
effect?
So what I'm saying there is that you see here, my paintbrush is going in the direction of light.
Oh, okay. Oh, I get you.
So it's
Okay,
coming
I get
down
you.
as a 3/4 direction,
I get
coming
you.
down from the front and then down the side of the face
get
like
you.
that, right?
You wouldn't be
So-
applying a whole darkness over the whole area, no.
No, but I can build it up. And that's
Okay,
one of the
I get
nice
you.
things about using oils. You can build it up,
All right.
right? So for the time being, what I'm doing is I'm just building up the shadow colors onto the face and working from the outlines and the contours of this person's face. It actually blends really well. And you can see the colors just fading away, and it's only just the shadows remaining. Now, every once in a while, the brush becomes full of paint. Move on, just get another brush. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Start off with a clean brush again, And your clean brushes will show off how it really turns out and how it blends. So by the end of this, I may have like 10 brushes lying on the side waiting to be cleaned again. So on the eyebrows, you just sort of fade the edges away. See how you can just fade that? That blends really well. It actually looks like natural hair on his eyebrow now. Okay, so here I've done just the general just of the shadows, and then you can draw the rest of the colors into the mustache and the beards and stuff like that, and you just keep building it layer after layer after layer. Okay, so I can continue darkening that, but I'm going to try and throw in a little bit of a highlight to it so you guys can see how the light hits and how it works the other way. So now you've seen how the base layer goes down and how the shadows go down around the head. Now, the last part I'm going to add in is just a little bit of showing you how the highlights work into the head. Now, take a lot of these little things with you and apply it to most of the heads that you paint, and that'll be the general gist of how we approach doing heads. Okay, so this is my highlight color now. So I'm going to add it to where it's going to count, where the light hits the head. So on the top of his forehead, you're going to see the highlight color. You can just barely see this. This is probably just blending in with the light that you're actually seeing cast on, so you're not going to see it that much. And on the top of his cheekbones here, like that, side of his head. And one of the things that you're seeing is I'm brushing this on, okay? One of the things that modelers as we tend to dab, or we poke with our brushes, and what happens is it hooks the brush and it bends the hairs, and that's what you don't want to do. What you want to do is you want to learn to just brush and stroke it on, and rotate your brush as you're doing this every once in a while. Okay, now we just go from that part, we just fade this off into the rest of the paint, which is nice about oil paints is that it blends so beautifully into each other, and it's all wet. So you can do this whole session in one sitting and come back and work it again tomorrow or the next day or next week if you wish. And I just put another layer on top. Right now it's just fading. Oh, that's much better. Much better. In most faces, they will lend you, depending on the figure, you have wrinkles and things like that. So it really tends well to helping the paint flow better if the figure is an older figure versus a young looking man figure. Okay, and now you can just add a little highlight onto the lip, because that's where the lights are casting on it like that. You can see the nice little cast reflection on the lip there. I don't know if you can see that on the very top part. Now, if you look at this, it looks very patchy, and now that I've just brushed this on. So much so that when you come back with your blending brushes, you can take that patchiness off and make it fade into each other, which is the beauty of having oil paint and doing it in one sitting.
I always take too much off when I start blending. And then I pop it off.
Yeah, that's the beauty of oil paint is so much control. And if you don't like it, you can wipe it right off.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can always just start again. But the other thing that's really neat about it is that oil paints isn't opaque, it's transparent. It sees the underlaying coats, which the translucency of the colors is also adds to the beauty of the blending.
Right? It's very quick. And he's probably Russian.
Aren't you?
Yeah, actually I am. And that isn't half bad.
That's good.
That's not
great.
half bad.
That's very good.
Actually, tell you the truth, it looks better than the other side.
The other side's a little bit more jaundiced. That was the base color. It was good.
So that's generally the gist of how we do that. I hope I helped you guys out, give you guys a good idea how to approach how to paint a head, and how the blending process works. So I hope you guys learned something nice out of it, and now you've seen the oil painting side of it. And maybe I'll come back and I'll help you guys with the acrylic side.
So any questions for Ying?
So if you were doing that like,
Awesome.
if you were doing that like tonight, could you then work that tomorrow? Would you have to let it fully dry for 5 days before going back to it, or?
You know, the idea is, what I've done there is get it ready for the next level of painting. This is no way near being finished. The idea is to get it to decently looking the way it is right now, and then once it dries a little bit, give it time to dry, like tomorrow, come back and approach it again. Because you will be able to see brush strokes, you will be able to see imperfections in the painting that you've done. And the nice thing is that oil painting is forgiving, but you have the luxury of building the layer on top of each other. I actually have here a figure I painted a while ago, and it has the first layer painted on. And if you're actually looking, if you can look at it here, Harvey, can you turn that on back for me for a second?
Sure.
If you look at it here, I've just basically did a rudimentary painting on this flesh tone. When I come back at this again, it's going to actually look better because the oil paint that I put on this right now is dry. So when I come back again with the next layer of oil paint, it has a tooth that'll actually bite into it, and it'll actually help the paint become even more apparent, and it'll help blending even better because I've already got a dried layer of oil paint on it already. Oil paint seems to like being painted on top of each other even when it's dry. When it's dry, it's the best time to approach another color or to build up layer on layer on layer. Okay. The other thing is, as you mix your colors with the medium one as you apply, it also will flatten it and it'll help smooth it down. But if you look closely at the head, if you can focus on the head, you can see my imperfections for this time around. And the next time I approach that again, the imperfections are going to disappear. And the highlights and the shadows will become smoother and will be more resilient. And the nice thing is that the underlying colors, like my highlights that are here at the moment, will still show through with, because oil paints are translucent, which means you can see right through them. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you, Ying.
You're welcome.